"He speaks English," Elizabeth acknowledged with surprise. Well, not exactly, but close enough for her to understand what he was saying. She let her gaze travel across the rest of the warriors she had been too quick to judge. Not all sported massive beards, nor did they appear unkempt. Their clothes were clean, although they seemed fond of wrapping their legs in ribbons and wearing breeches. Several had heavy silver and gold clasps on their shirts, but their faces looked menacing, scowling at the family in front of them. She noticed the large amount of weapons visible. A sword she would have expected, and a bow and arrows, but some carried axes in their belts. Axes? Heaven forfend, those tools should be used for chopping wood, not as a weapon. Perhaps they lived out of doors and needed them to make a fire. She let her eyes travel towards the face of the Viking with the largest axe. He was staring back at her, sporting a lecherous grin on his countenance. He was one of the bearded ones, with a wide scar splitting his left eyebrow. Jane curtsied in the periphery of her vision, bringing Elizabeth back to their present conundrum. She was taking a step towards the chieftain when he called out. The 20-odd Vikings and the one red-headed female they had brought along all parted in the middle as the brawniest man Elizabeth had ever seen approached her family with a deep scowl between his brows. He was as dark as his friend was fair. His black hair was styled like his friend's, but the queue reached the lining of his leather breeches. His face was covered in a huge black beard. His piercing blue eyes were half hidden behind bushy eyebrows, and his mouth was set in a grim line. He had painted stripes down his cheeks, probably soot, Elizabeth guessed, and stifled a tug at the corner of her mouth. "Fitzwilliam Darcy's son, the Wolf, and the Jarl of Nidaros, appointed by the King of Norway, Harald Halfdanson," the chieftain proudly presented his friend before an incredulous audience. Elizabeth was reminded of the tale of David and Goliath. This wolf-man was clearly Goliath, but she found comfort in the thought that David had been the victorious one in that battle. However, one look at her brother belied her ruminations. He looked utterly defeated and strangely shamefaced, as he should be, if this monstrosity of a man was meant to be her delicate sister's husband. The Vikings exchanged some words between them, spoken too low for Elizabeth to hear. The red-headed lady approached Jane and positioned herself behind her, only to remove the elaborate braids from the top of Jane's head. She loosened them and let the beautiful blonde tresses fall freely down her back. Goliath, as Elizabeth had named him privately in her mind, looked displeased. Elizabeth thought that might be a good sign. Perhaps all was not lost. Could the troll prefer another troll to her beautiful sister? The touch of a smile graced Elizabeth's face as she scrutinized the giant. "Too short." Goliath had a deep, baritone voice that carried across the yard. A short dispute erupted between Goliath and Charles. They were speaking in hushed tones, but the fierceness of their whispers belied the fact that this was an amicable exchange. Goliath turned, looked at her brother, and sneered. "Swordin." Goliath was obviously insulting her brother, but it mattered little, as no one had understood what he had just said, at least none of the Anglo-Saxons. But the Viking warriors pointed at her brother with disgust showing on their faces. The entire affair seemed slightly ridiculous to Elizabeth, but her amusement was short-lived. Goliath flicked his head, and a moment later the redhead had turned to Elizabeth and unfastened the ribbon she had tied around her bun. Her dark, curly tresses fell almost to the back of her knees.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.